Right now, Ron Pollock is here with us. He is the founding executive director of Families USA. FamiliesUSA.org is the website. And Ron, welcome to the program.
Always great to see you. Thanks.
It's great to see you, too. Let me turn you up here. There we go. Say something.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
That works better. That works a whole lot. So tell me, what's Families USA doing? What in general and with this Radio Row today?
So first of all, we've organized Radio Row, and we're so thrilled that you've come here. And the idea is to try to make sure that the stakes of this lawsuit are understood by the public. Now, we are flying in dozens of people from across the country. These are people who are in the states where the states have so far refused to set up these marketplaces, and the federal government is doing it in its place. And if subsidies are withdrawn, these people are going to find health insurance unaffordable. They'll rejoin the ranks of the uninsured. And many of the people who we're bringing in are people who've got major health problems, and their health and lives will truly be at risk. Tomorrow morning, we will have the folks who we're flying in standing in front of the court, and they will tell their own stories. Now, obviously, they can't do it inside the courtroom, right. But at least we hope to make sure that the public understands what the stakes are.
Hasn't the court declared that while all federal property in Washington, D.C. is essentially a free speech zone, the Supreme Court is the exception to that? They can arrest you for having a demonstration out in front of the Supreme Court? Or
well, no, we have
to do it on the street in front.
No, we have permits.
Okay.
So you have to get a permit, and we do have a permit, and we'll be just in front of the steps of the Supreme Court, and that's perfectly appropriate. Nobody's going to get arrested.
You know, when and I think you and I have had this conversation before. I discovered this when I was writing which book? I think it was my book Rebooting the American Dream. It was about maybe 5 years ago. That Robert Ball, who was the principal writer of the Medicare legislation in the 60s in the Johnson administration, and was close friends with Lyndon Johnson, is on the record, I mean, he's deceased now, but is on the record having said that when they wrote that Medicare legislation, their plan, they put this thing into place so that at some point in the future, and they expected it would happen probably in the administration of the president following Johnson, assuming it was a Democrat, that at any point in the future, they could simply drop the eligibility age for Medicare by a decade every couple of years and take a couple of years for them to swallow that python, or that rabbit going through the python, to add it, to ramp up their administrators until it was at zero. And now you've got a national single-payer healthcare system. Is there any way to bring that message out? Is that an alternative to what's going on? I mean, if the Supreme Court takes down Obamacare, is it time for us to start talking seriously about we already have a single-payer system in this country? It works. It's going to be in trouble, or it's going to have some challenges, let's say. As one of your colleagues was telling me this morning, the growth of Alzheimer's and the aging boomers, bring everybody into it. It's solve it forever.
Well, it's a solution that could work. But politically, I have my doubts as to whether that's going to happen.
Well, with this Congress.
And we could not have passed that in 2010 when the Affordable Care Act was enacted into law. We actually had hoped that at least there would be some alternative, like a public plan option, that people could choose. But even that would not have passed. There were too many folks whose vote we got, but we wouldn't have gotten it with a public plan option, and that's why it had to be dropped.
Right.
So, I love Bob Ball, and he really played such a pioneering role with respect to healthcare in this country.
Did you know him?
I knew him very well.
Wow. Have I mischaracterized him, or is that?
No, I think Bob would very much say that the Medicare program potentially provided a model as to how we could provide health care across the country. And having a system of Medicare for everybody clearly would make sense. It's the politics, and I don't think we're likely to see that, at least for quite a long time.
Yeah, in part because money has such a stranglehold on politics in the United States as a consequence of other stupid decisions by right-wingers on the Supreme Court. You have Buckley in 76, First National Bank in 77, Citizens United, McCutcheon. I mean,
Gore v. Bush.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it was Bush v. Gore.
Yeah.
Bush initiated that lawsuit.
You're right. And
saying that he would be irreparably harmed if they counted the vote in Florida. That should have told us everything.
Well, actually, it's very interesting because I've heard stories about what was happening in the last moments of this. And the Democratic side that was watching the tallying of the votes felt momentarily there was going to be a change with Gore on top.
Right.
And so there was this rush to make sure that the voting would stop, the vote counting would stop.
Right, yeah. And in fact, when the Supreme Court counted them a year later, I mean, they buried it in the 17th paragraph of an article, Arthur
Schlesinger?
Yeah, whoever the editor of the New York Times was, he said the reason why we buried the fact that when we recounted the vote in Florida, Al Gore won, no matter what metric you used, unless the metric you used was only those 3 counties where Al Gore originally wanted to sue, then he would have still lost. But if you count the whole state, no matter what, Gore won. But they buried it in the 17th paragraph because it was a month after 9/11. They didn't want to diminish the authority of President Bush during a time of national crisis.
Well,
anyhow, we've wandered far afield here.
But it's really interesting that we're talking about it. When the Supreme Court decided to take this case, King v. Burwell,
right.
The woman who wrote for the New York Times for about 25 years as the Supreme Court reporter, Linda Greenhouse,
right.
wrote a column, and it was a very interesting column. And what she said was that when the court decided to take this case, one of her colleagues, she's now at Yale Law School, said, "This is Bush v. Gore all over again." And she said, "No, it's not. It's worse than that."
Right.
That there is no reason that the court has taken this. There's no constitutional issue here. There's no conflict between the circuits. And 2 of the circuits already had scheduled oral argument, and the Supreme Court leapfrogged that.
Amazing.